Okay, welcome to part two of my assembly of a Hydra-Matic transmission. I thought I'd begin this part with going over the books that I'm talking about during the session. This is the first one. This is the most important one. It's very detailed. If you're not familiar with building transmissions, this one does a really good job providing pictures and diagrams for pretty much every step along the way. All right, next one is the shop manual. So this is the 55 Oldsmobile shop manual. Mine's missing its cover, but section 3 talks about the Hydra-Matic. So it's more specific to the exact transmission that you're building, whereas the other one is more general, covers a lot of different manufacturers and transmissions through many years. So this is going to be specific to the one that you're building. And then last is the parts requisition guide. So this is nice if you need to look up part numbers and stuff. Gives you all of that information right there. All right, where we left off last was I was missing that last snap ring, or lock ring as they call them, and got that installed. Hopefully you can see this okay. All right, now we're going to install the speedometer in the output shaft housing, and I put a little bit of gasket sealer around the outside of this because it seems strange to me they don't reference an O-ring or a gasket or anything, and it just butts up against the cast iron. So it seems like a leak point, so I thought that might be a good idea, and there shouldn't be any chance of it getting into the fluid because it's a pretty long sleeve. So let's tighten that in there. 1-inch wrench. Alright, what we're doing next is preparing the output shaft assembly to mate up to the case. So a couple of different things that need to be installed here. We have the selective washer, and this is a number 5. There are different thicknesses, and you need to get the selective washer that's appropriate for the end play of your main shaft. And if you were able to measure this before taking it apart, then you already know what washer to use. However, my transmission came partially disassembled, so I wasn't able to measure this. So there's a good chance I'll be taking this apart again. There's also a thrust washer that goes on the other side of your main shaft. There's this reverse cone key, and this installs up here, and of course we have our gasket. So I'm going to install these things in the output shaft assembly so that we're ready to mate them up. Alright, I use Vaseline to hold a lot of this stuff together. So here's your reverse cone key. I'm going to spread Vaseline on the gasket to hold that in place. Alright, notice where the slot is on the gasket compared to the reverse cone key. You basically need to rotate this till it lines up. Alright, next is the thrust washer. Put a little bit of ATF on it. And now the main shaft. Alright, to aid in this installation, you can install a screwdriver between the cap and the rear unit that holds that back for you. Okay, now we're ready to remove this holding fixture. And and install our thrust washer. So we'll put a little bit of Vaseline on this to hold it in place. Alright, now you can slide the main shaft and the housing and the whole assembly through the intermediate shaft. Okay, took a little bit of manipulation off camera there to get that those gears to mesh up in the rear unit. So now we can put our bolts through. We can skip the one for the parking prowl for now. That's installed later. Alright, now we can install the flange bolts. Of course you have to line up the flange with the rear unit so you can get these installed. And we'll do them finger tight for now. Alright, now you can tighten these flange bolts down, torque to 10 to 13 pounds. That's the tighter I can get with a regular wrench. There's a specialty tool for holding this in place while you tighten this bolts, but I've been able to just wedge this screwdriver in between the drum and the case and get it pretty well held tight there. Next you tighten these housing bolts down, torque to 30 pounds. Alright, we're working on the front pump now, and the first thing to do is to install the oil ring. You should put this in the Taurus cover housing and check the gap, make sure your gap is good. So we'll slide this on first. Okay, next is the oil seal. It's a good idea to put some Hydra-Matic fluid on that for reassembly, and tap this in. There's a specialty tool for this, and I actually have it for putting this seal in. Took quite a bit of persuasion, but I managed to get that seal installed. Okay, next is this relief valve. So this piece slides in first. Okay, followed by a spring, and then this button, and then you have to put this pin through while holding this down. So it looks like that. On this other port, install a new O-ring. Alright, now we're going to install this slide in here. There's a nested spring that fits in that slot. It lines up with that dimple. Alright, next we're going to install one of the guide rings and then the rotor. You should mark this before you take it out, but mine had a T on it, so I'm going by that marking. The other side has a box, so the T side up in my case. And then another guide ring, and then the vanes. If you look at the surfaces, you'll want to put them back the way they came. So like that. Next we're ready to install the cover, but before we do, I wanted to prime this pump with some ATF lubricated here. And the cover only goes one direction with the pins and where the bolt holes line up. So make sure you get that right. And then you're ready to put the screws in. There's lock washers on each one of these screws. Okay, we'll get this semi-tight and then we'll put it in the vise to torque it. Alright, there's a tool for holding this in place while you torque these screws down, but I don't have that tool, so this is my method. There we go. Alright, next we can install an O-ring around the front pump here. This replaces a gasket on some units. And then we can install the pump onto the gear. And there's a woodruff key on here that needs to be lined up. Alright, it's ready for installation. Okay, now we can install the front pump. So first thing is a bronze thrust washer that goes up against there. Then the pump itself. Then there's a locating washer, so you have to rotate this little mark where the washer belongs. Alright, now there's a bronze thrust washer that goes here, and then a steel washer, and then your lock ring. There you go. Alright, now we're going to check the main shaft end play. You need a dial indicator for that, and I purchased a long bolt that could fit in here to mount it. So that. This is a specialty tool. Basically, while you're measuring this, since the shaft likes to flop around in here, this guides it so that it can only move in one direction. Like that. And if you make sure you hold the front drum forward for this measurement. All right. We're working on the front servo now. So install this piston into the main body. There's a oil ring on it. So okay, a little bit challenging. Spring goes in next. And then this retainer, and another spring like that. All right, next we're going to install this piston into its sleeve here. There we go. Now we're going to assemble these two together. Your bolt holes line up. Put your bolts through. And there's a plug that goes in the end. Okay. Alright, we're putting the exhaust valve into its location. There's a spring and a retaining pin. So it looks like that. Alright, I laid out these valves and springs, how they go in. One is the 4-3 shift valve, one is the overrun valve. So spring goes in, and the valve. We'll put a little ATF on these. Pop them in. Hold this down. All right, all tightened up. Next, you mate the valve body together. So you got the plate, and the body itself, and the bolts. And that's ready. Last is the adjusting screw. Which slides in right there, and then there's a clip to hold this in place. Like that. And there's this delivery tube, and I think it goes that way. All right, ready for installation. All right, next we're installing the front servo. There's a oil delivery pipe needs to go in first. And then with this band, you'll see this pin pushes in there, and then this stopper adjuster fits in there. So I find it easier to put that one in first. It's kind of like that. And then you just gotta line that pipe up. Okay. Okay. If you notice, I moved this down to the floor because when you start bolting on more parts, it's nearly impossible to lift by yourself anymore. All right, working on the rear servo. First part is to install the accumulator piston and the accumulator body. So shaft slides in like this. You have to compress the oil ring. Like that. Alright, next the spring has a tapered end. It goes on the shaft up into that shoulder. It's a very tight fit. There we go. Snaps into place. Alright, next is the booster piston, and the kit came with new rings for it. Alright, now we're going to install the booster piston. Get this all lubed up. Have to compress this ring. Send that all the way down till you see the pin come out. Next is the rear servo exhaust valve and spring. It's in there. And then prepare for assembly by installing the gasket here. Alright, next we're going to put these two assemblies together. This oil ring has to be seated in here, and there's no way to compress it. So you just have to be careful. This can be a bit challenging. Alright. That's as far as it's going to go. We'll let the bolts compress it the rest of the way. Alright, next we're going to be compressing this spring and putting the bolts in. There's a specialty holding fixture and tool for compressing this, but it's not impossible to do with brute force. What I did here was put it sideways in a vise so that it can hold it in place, and I can get some power behind it to compress this spring. So there's actually 3 springs here. We got this cap here, and you got 2 springs inside of there, and a third one around the outside, and this all fits into here. Alright, after lots of pushing and grunting off camera, I did get these bolts installed, so we just need to slowly tighten up the bolts from side to side. Okay, got that together. Alright, the rear servo is one of those that you can check your work. There's a port right here. Put air here. Should be good to go. Alright, we're installing the rear servo now. First thing is this oil delivery pipe needs to be put in place. Goes here. And then on the band, make sure you have the spring in place. This pin that's on the band lines up with that, and there's also this oil delivery pipe that needs to fit between the 2 servos. Okay, everything lined up. Let's put the bolts in. All right. Now we're assembling the governor assembly, and the first step in that is to put this pump together, and I'll put a little bit of ATF in there, and then the cover. You'll see there's a wear pattern, so I figure best put it back the way it came. And there's 4 bolts here, and there's no lock washers. Alright, next goes the G2 plunger, and then there's the bushing, and this is keyed so it can only go one way. There's an indentation on the stop plate, so it fits together. Now I'm going to install new oil rings on the governor. It came in my rebuild kit. Okay. Now we're installing the governor on the drive flange. If you paid attention to the directions, you should put markings on here so it goes back the way it came. So those are my markings. And there are lock washers on these bolts. Okay, governor's ready for installation. All right, now we're installing the rear pump assembly. Then there's a clip that holds this pipe in place. There we go.